it looks like the guy is making a snow angel on the sidewalk. It's like this. I mean, come on. There's even a dog there, and the dog, if you can read his mind, the dog's thinking, get up and quit faking this nonsense. There's no blood. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Take a look at the picture. It's good for a few laughs. So those were our fake terrorist attacks this week. Nothing too big, but interesting nonetheless. Now, something else happened this week that was pretty interesting. Bathhouse Barry thinks he can just declare the Second Amendment void. So let's talk a little bit about guns. The Second Amendment, I'm just going to read it to you in case anyone doesn't know how it's worded. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. Pretty simple. So they talk about a militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Okay, I would agree. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. So we're going to get into this a little bit more. Now, if Barry didn't like the Second Amendment, which he doesn't, I mean, the guy is obsessed with getting rid of all guns, there is a way to amend the Constitution. And this is the constitutional amendment process. The Constitution provides that an amendment may be proposed either by the Congress with a 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate, or by a constitutional convention called for by 2/3 of the state legislatures. None of the 27 amendments to the Constitution have been proposed by a constitutional convention. Since the president does not have a constitutional role in the amendment process, the joint resolution does not go to the White House for signature. Okay, so, I mean, that's all you have to do. You get 2/3 of the House and Senate to support the amendment, and you have a constitutional amendment. So, if Barry has so much support for this, why didn't he just seek a constitutional amendment? He didn't because he's a fraud. He doesn't have support, and the American people don't want any of this legislation. He likes to blame it on the NRA, but Barry is supposedly a former constitutional law professor at law school. Supposedly. I mean, we all know about his lack of records, really lack of documents even proving who he is. But anyway, if he really is or was a constitutional law professor, then I would think he would know the most simple of things to do with the Constitution, like how to amend it. I mean, you would think so. So either he is a complete babbling idiot, or he is a criminal not following the Constitution. It's as simple as that. He's either one or the other. Please don't try and make it anything other than it is. It's that simple, really. Now, do executive orders violate the Constitution? Well, yes, they do. Now, here's what's going on with executive orders. The president can issue executive orders, but they're only binding on the executive department of the federal government. So he's kind of like the CEO, if you will, of the White House, the executive branch of the government. Only laws passed through formal legislative process have full force of law, going through Congress and the Senate. Executive orders don't meet this because it's just a declaration of King Barry telling you to do something. Only Congress has the power to write and pass laws. So, Barry can't do this with any law except to kind of order people around in the White House. That's all that executive orders are good for. They can't even change regular laws, yet alone constitutional laws. And of course, issuing executive orders that are given the full force of law is a clear violation of the Constitution. And like I said, there's an easy way to amend the Constitution if you don't like what it says. And Barry knows this, I would think. And he's choosing to not do it. So he is a criminal. Now, when I ran for Congress in 2012, two things kept being brought up to me all the time about the Second Amendment, constantly. And one was the phrase well regulated in the Second Amendment, well regulated militia, which I just went over a second ago. Now, just think, if you can, for a minute. The amendment, the Constitution and the amendments are checks on the power of the federal government, telling the federal government it can't do certain things, and people have certain privileges that cannot be taken away. So why on earth would the Founding Fathers put in a provision that the federal government could make the Second Amendment well regulated? I mean, why even put it in there at all? It doesn't make sense. But people kept telling me this when I was running for Congress. The federal government has authority because the Constitution says the Second Amendment can be well regulated. What a bunch of crap. I mean, these people have an IQ of 3? You're listing out things the federal government can't do, and then you're saying, well, they can regulate the Second Amendment. No, that's not how it works. The well-regulated militia would be the people in the militia regulating it. So anyone telling you that is not very smart. Now, the second thing people kept bringing up to me about the Second Amendment is, why should people be able to have powerful weapons like assault rifles? They don't need them for hunting. And the response to that is the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting, nothing at all. It has to do with having protections against an overbearing federal government. At the time the Constitution was drafted and approved, the weapons owned by the people were approximately the same strength as the weapons owned by the federal government. They had rifles, and that was about it. Now, the federal government has much more powerful weapons, and the people are at risk for having less and less powerful weapons all the time. When the balance of power and weapons is more or less equal or close, the people have more and more freedoms. And what you have recently is that balance is getting out of whack. Federal government is getting more and more powerful, law enforcement is getting more and more powerful weapons, and the people are getting less powerful weapons, or at least in Barry's dreams, they'll be having less powerful weapons. So that is the reason that people need to have more and more powerful weapons, because the federal government has more and more powerful weapons, but the feds, and especially Barry, would like you to be armed with nothing more than a slingshot if it was up to him. The Founding Fathers, I went back and I looked up some of their quotes when they were approving the Second Amendment, because I thought it would be interesting to kind of get a feel for how they were thinking about this sort of thing. Because people today just don't think back that far about what was going on at the time. But anyway, listen, we're due here for a break in a minute, so let's take our break. You're listening to Real Investigations with Kurt Haskell, and we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Real Investigations, which can be heard exclusively on TalkNetwork.com. If you like this show, go on Talk Network and listen to some of our other great shows. When we left off, we were talking about the Founding Fathers and their thoughts on the need for the Second Amendment, because Barry Obama this week decided to take it upon himself to try and take those rights away. And we're going to get into in a minute what exactly he's ordering everyone to do and why it's important. But before we get there, we're going to go over some of the thoughts of the Founding Fathers on the Second Amendment. You can see where their train of thought was at that time. So, I'm just going to read a few of these and then we'll move on. I ask, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people. To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. Quote from George Mason. And that the said Constitution be never construed to authorize Congress to infringe the just liberty of the press, or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the U.S., who are peaceful citizens, from keeping their own arms, or to raise standing armies, unless necessary for the defense of the U.S., or of some one or more of them, or to prevent the people from petitioning in a peaceful and orderly manner the federal legislature for a redress of grievances, or to subject the people to unreasonable searches and seizures of their persons, papers, or possessions. Samuel Adams. Laws that forbid the carrying of arms laws of such a nature. They disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They act rather to encourage than to prevent homicides, for an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. So think about that when you're talking about gun-free zones, according to Thomas Jefferson, anyway. Another quote from Thomas Jefferson: "No free man shall be debarred the use of arms." Another one from Thomas Jefferson: "A strong body makes the mind strong. As to the species of exercise, I advise the gun. While this gives moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball and others of that nature are too violent for the body and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be the constant companion on your walks." Thomas Jefferson again. "What country can preserve its liberties if the rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms." Thomas Jefferson, once again. "The supposed quietude of a good man allures the ruffian, while on the other hand, arms like laws discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as property. The balance of power is the scale of peace. The same balance would be preserved were all the world destitute of arms, for all would be alike. But since some will not, others dare not lay them aside. And while a single nation refuses to lay them down, it is proper that all should keep them up. Horrid mischief would ensue were one half the world deprived of the use of them." Thomas Paine. "Are we at last brought to such humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our defense? Where is the difference between having our arms in possession and under our direction and having them under the management of Congress? If our defense be the real object of having those arms, in whose hands can they be trusted with more propriety or equal safety to us as in our own hands?" Patrick Henry. "If the representatives of the people betray their constituents, there is no then resource left but in the exertion of that original right of self-defense which is paramount to all positive forms of government, and which against the usurpations of the national rulers may be exerted with infinitely better prospect of success than against those of the rulers of an individual state. In a single state, if the persons entrusted with supreme power became usurpers, the different parcel subdivisions or district of which it contains, having no distinct government each, can take no regular measures for defense. The citizens must rush tumultuously to arms without concert, without system, without resources, except in their courage and despair." Alexander Hamilton. So that gives you kind of an idea of what the thoughts of the Founding Fathers were at the time the Second Amendment was put into place. So, Now we have Barry Obama, a man that has never owned a gun, that rides a bicycle with a pink helmet, that many have said was a frequent visitor of the Chicago bathhouses, where there's a suite named after him called the Presidential Suite, who cannot get his way on banning guns through the process of a constitutional amendment, decides he will merely declare provisions of the law that you have to follow, saying that he does not want to take all your guns away, but in his dreams, he would love nothing but that. He would love to take everyone away and be the sole ruler of you, with you having no way to defend yourselves. But the man is very devious, and what he says does not seem that bad until you look into the details of it. So let's get into what he's proposing, or what he has